2 sessions so far on relationships and on spiritual covering, and today we come to talk about father-son relationship itself. And the interesting thing about this is that it has a direct application not just to church life or ministry, but to business and to politics and to sport, to relationships in general, to the family too, of course. But it's in the church or church life or in ministry relationships that we learn the principles that are in fact meant to be applied to all of life. And these are especially effective in business with employee-employer relationships, partnership relationships, and relationships with suppliers and so on and so forth. Relationships of the heart are critical. But if we don't get the father-son relationship right, or our understanding of the principles of it, we'll always go wrong. Anyway, I'm going to give you a few examples. And recently, and it was earlier this year, I had 2 young men come to see me. They were business partners. Their business had grown. They now had numbers of people employed, contracts for the various kinds of work they did. But they had a very pressing problem at that time, and it was cash flow. And I knew these men, and they were related to me in ministry, and I'd known them for a long time. But they had never come in and submitted their personal or financial affairs, or that is, they never talk so openly about it. Their cash flow problem was that even though they were owed quite a lot of money with their debtors, hundreds of thousands, right then they'd hit a patch where they were run out of cash completely. In fact, they had about $20 in the bank account, and they gave it away. And they came to me in that state, and they said, look, the business is viable, but right now the cash isn't there. So they came to me for prayer. And I prayed for them, I blessed the business, commanded the release of the cash, and the change was amazing. That within 1 or 2 days, they were awash with cash. In fact, they were paying cash for equipment they needed, new equipment. And it was an immediate turnaround, and not only that, they'd had 1 or 2 staff problems. I prayed about that. And they had really quite astounding outcomes with those issues as well. But I spoke to them about the idea of their business really being a kingdom business. Now, kingdom business is a funny term because as such, in one sense, there's no such thing as a kingdom business, because when this world is all over, and the Lord says to us, well done, and enter into the joy of your Lord, and come, inherit the kingdom prepared for you. What we know of as business and material things that we have today, of course, will not be there. It's a different prospect altogether. And so it's not as if the kingdom is, the business we have is resurrected, and we keep operating the business. No, but what it means is, I think, when we refer to kingdom business, it means that the people who own that business or operate it are sold out to Jesus. They want to serve the kingdom of God, not only with their own lives, their own family, but they want their business to serve the purposes of Christ and the kingdom of God. I spoke to them about this, that if they were to put not only their lives, but the whole conduct of their business in the hands of the Lord, and see Him as being in the business with them, but see the business as being to really further the purpose, not only of their own lives, but of the whole work of Christ. Don't just see it as a business for which there's to be a profitable gain, but see this bigger picture. They were excited about that. They went away, talked about it, and came back to me, they really wanted to explore all the more what that meant. The initial thing was, though, that even without that decision being made, there was such a turnaround in their finances and in their staff circumstances. And this was because 2 things were already in place. One was spiritual covering was in place. They were already relating to me as over them in the Lord. They walk with me in the Lord. But as well as that, there was a developed father-son relationship as a part of that. So both of these things we've been talking about in recent weeks, that is the relational nature of Christianity and spiritual covering, these things were in place for them. And so they came to me as the authority figure in their life. I prayed for them, I blessed them, and the outcome is astounding. But see, in that there, you have their act of it's humility, it's submission to the authority of Christ, and so on and so forth, and therefore the blessing flows. Now, we need to explore father-son relationship in the context of business as well as church, and so on and so forth. These men have come back to me and said, no, they really want to explore the idea of kingdom business. So I've continued to meet with them in their board meetings, and there's a full accountability of their business. They want me to hear and to understand their decisions, give advice, and continue to pray over the business. And we'll see better and better staff outcomes as a result of that, as well as, and I always pray to God their family time, make them wise with respect to walking with their own wives, their own children, and so on and so forth. Well, that's just an example of how father-son relationship works to the benefit of all, but not without this sense of authority, of spiritual covering. Without covering, really authority doesn't flow, because it's not spiritual fathering as such that represents the authority of Christ, it's spiritual covering that represents the authority of Christ, and you need both of these things working together. The submission to authority is the critical thing. And this is, of course, the direction to which tithing is meant to flow. Tithing is always an act of submission to the Lordship of Jesus. That's not so commonly known, but it ought to be commonly known. The whole purpose of the tithe is a regular, weekly or monthly act of submission to the Lordship of Jesus. And if it's submission to Lordship, and tithing always represents submission to Lordship, it always did when Abraham tithed to Melchizedek and so on. When Jacob was first converted at Peniel, and he declared, from now on, you're my God, you'll have the 10th part. It's always an act of submission. Our giving doesn't end there, it begins there, but that act of submission must be in place regularly, consistently. But where does the tithe go? See, it's meant to flow to the authority over us. And this is why when people are members of churches, it's meant to be brought along with all the other believers and submitted under the authority of the senior leader of that church, because he represents the authority of Christ. Likewise, if you become the senior pastor, as I did years ago, you have to say, well, where does my tithe go? I can't submit it under my own authority. No, who is the authority over you in the Lord? And that's where your tithe goes. And that's when you discover the real power of the tithe. Although we're getting off our subject a little bit, which is father-son relationship, but in the light of spiritual covering. I'll give you the second example that I had on my staff years ago. And so when we talk staff, because I'm talking church staff, but when we talk staff, this applies to all circumstances in life. Because now it wasn't just a case of someone who was a member of the church seeing me as a spiritual leader. This was an employee. And I had at the time 13 or 14 employees on the church staff, and several of them were pastors. And this was a pastor who'd worked for me for 6 years or 7, and the church was a happy place, and we'd accomplished a great deal. But I noticed, in a growing way, and especially in the 6th year, that he seemed to resent me. And this was a dear brother who had a big heart, big pastoral heart, loved people. And so he wasn't exactly a senior leader type, but he had a big pastoral heart. He'd studied for the ministry. The call was real. It was genuine. And he was meant to be there. But there were things he struggled with, and I didn't know when I employed him that there was such a thing as an orphan heart, but in fact he had a very bad case of it. And this was way back around the year 2001 or 2. And he was a brother who took offense very easily. I didn't know that. He would often phone in, say he was sick, and you wouldn't see him for 3 days, and his story was he'd been sick for 3 days. The truth is, he was so deeply hurt and wounded, something had offended him, and he couldn't show his face for 3 days. And then he always struggled to accept authority. He's often late for meetings, and just when you look around for staff to help with some particular thing, he's missing in action, and this was showing up more and more. And you think, what is wrong here? And in the end, of course, he came to see me, and he said, John, we've got to talk. And I knew that sounded like trouble. And so he started to accuse me of all kinds of things, that I'd mistreated this person and, overreacted on this. And, it turned out any hurt in the church, and in his viewpoint, it was all my fault. Well, it turns out this is, in fact, the common thing that happens with people who have an orphan heart. They don't know how to walk in relationships, but their big problem is authority figures. They don't know how to relate. They can't come near. They cannot trust. In their growing up, somehow something has hurt their heart, marred the heart, and they struggle greatly in relating to authority figures. So here was a dear brother who had a great pastoral gift. He loved people, would spend any amount of time with people. The troubled people, he'd pour himself into them and help them, but he couldn't relate to those who had authority or those who were over him in the Lord. And if anything went wrong, it was all your fault. And this is typical. And I said to him, well, what you say could be true, it could be false. I said, if you like, we could call all the other men in, and you could tell, you're welcome in my office to tell them everything you've just told me, and they can tell us who's right or wrong, whether it's just your misconceptions or whether, in fact, I have these faults. I said, but I've got a feeling if we do that, you're the one that will get hurt. And he said, oh, no, I think you're right. We'll just talk about it, you and me. And this is where I had to level with him, because I'd noticed this growing resentment, and he would never come near me. I always had to go to him. And I said, look, you've got a really, really big heart. Full of love, full of good things. But I said, there are things in the heart that aren't good. In there is cynicism and pride and low self-esteem. And none of us knew at this stage what this was. He asked for time to pray, and he was prayerful, and he took some days and sought the Lord. And interestingly, the Lord gave him a revelation. Christ stepped in and really revealed something to him. I was surprised as to what it was. I thought, why didn't he reveal to him something about himself? But no, what Christ revealed to him was the importance of authority, and how important the restoration of apostles were, how important apostles are to the work of Christ. And without apostles, where the church has to go, it can't be taken there without apostles. And so this is, in fact, what he needed. Because I didn't realize at that point that the real struggle with anyone that has an orphan heart is they can't relate to authority, because something about their relationship probably with their own father has been harmed. And in fact, this was the case it was with Tony. The way his father had raised him, good family, good marriage, but his father was always saying, oh, you're useless, you're useless. And Tony grew up believing that he was useless and he would never accomplish anything, would never amount to anything. Nothing he ever did would be good enough, so why bother? But he made up for all of this by being happy, relaxed, laid back, casual. And he was a happy guy, but coming to meetings, always casual, flop in a chair. But this was a cover-up for a heart that was awry in relationships. Anyway, great change was at hand. Tony, sincere brother, wonderful brother, prayerful brother. He prayed and prayed into this. And it was a time when my own spiritual father was coming to visit, and he came with a particular message about father-son relationship. This was the year 2002. We'd never heard such things before, that it wasn't known, that it was more than a matter of just walking with God as your spiritual father. You had to walk with your leaders as spiritual fathers. You had to have the heart of a son toward those who are over you in the Lord. We'd never thought of it in those terms. But and my spiritual father was Chuck Clayton, a great apostle, passed away now, gone to heaven. And as Chuck talked to us about these things, the Spirit of the Lord came upon those meetings and totally transformed our hearts. In the next session, session 4, I'll tell you what happened to my heart and how it so affected my cash flow and the strengthening and the growth of our ministry. The same principles apply in business. I'll talk about that in the next one, but just finishing the story, in that series of meetings when the Spirit of the Lord moved on us, he moved on Tony. After one of those meetings, I looked up, and here, coming across from the other side of the building to me, was Tony, beaming, happy. And he came, put his arms around me. Tony had become a son. Up until that point, he'd been an orphan, but the Spirit of the Lord so healed his heart. You know, the astounding thing was that Tony had been a pastor on my staff for 6 or 7 years at that point, and no one had ever seen him as a spiritual father. But from that point, from the point that Tony became a son, people began to see him and ask him to be their spiritual father, began to walk with him. Not only that, 3 weeks later, the Spirit of the Lord came upon him in a meeting and gave him authority to bless our people. I was often away traveling in ministry, and the Lord gave him authority so that whenever I was away, he could lay hands on people and bless them as I might do if I was home. And so the Lord began to add to him, grant him grace, grant him understanding. Tony came to have a big heart, but that orphan heart needed to be healed. And this is often the way it is. They're often employees, they're often members of churches, struggle with these things. Something's been marred in the heart, so they find it difficult to draw near, difficult to trust authority. They take offense easily, they run easily, they can be full of resentment. Something goes wrong, it's always the boss's fault. Well, these things need dealing with. Sometimes the orphan heart is in the boss. You yourself might struggle with this. If not in your own business, you might struggle with it in the church, in relationship to church leaders. Well, healing needs to take place. I wrote a whole book, a 100,000 word textbook called The Spirit of Sonship. So it's been my most appreciated book in the world. That book has a whole chapter on the orphan heart or the orphan spirit. And I'd recommend it. And if you have that need, study that. But in fact, all the concepts, 17 chapters in that book, every single one of those chapters has a very, very important concept with respect to father-son relationship, which affects us all. Every last one of us is meant to be a son because Jesus is. Every last one of us is meant to have the same kind of heart Jesus did. Everything Jesus did, he did as a son to a father. Everything we do, we're meant to do as a son to a father too, whether we're men or women, meant to have that heart of sonship. In other words, it's discovering father-son relationship is really a matter of discovering proper discipleship, how to have the same kind of heart in walking with others around us and those over us. And this is why it applies to Christians in business, in politics, in sport, wherever they are, as well as in church life. Having the same kind of heart as Jesus had to him who was over him. There's an interesting text in Hebrews chapter 3. It says of Jesus, he was faithful to the one who appointed him. That's a little part of sonship right there. And so in closing this session, let me say, wherever I travel in the world, I say to apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, teachers, whoever I'm with in conferences, I say, every one of us, no matter how old you are, I'm now 69, 70 next birthday, I've been in the ministry nearly 50 years, and so I'm a good example. I always walk with a father. And I say to everyone in ministry, you must, well, of course, specifically, must walk with covering. And the reason is this: I think no matter how old you are, no matter how mature, no matter how long you've been here in life, no matter how much of a father you are to other people, you still always should have someone that you regard as being over you in the Lord. And if you're a member of a church, of course, you should see this as your pastor, someone over you in the Lord, for this reason. Every single one of us, no matter how old we are, no matter how spiritually mature, should always have someone that we choose to love and we choose to honor and we choose to serve as being over us in the Lord. Well, this is a little bit to do with father-son relationship, and I'll discuss it further with you next time we meet in our fourth session.